You have one precious life. How will you make your money work for you? It's time for Sage Money Conversations, where your financial happiness and confidence are always the subject. Here's your host, certified financial planner, Barbara Norman.
Hello and welcome to Sage Money Conversations. I'm your host, Barbara Norman. Today, I am super excited. We have a wonderful topic, and that's living a minimalist life. We have today Stephanie Seferian. She is the Sustainable Minimalism podcast host, and she's just written a book on sustainable minimalism. So, Stephanie, when I think about minimalism and what it's meant in my life, I have, in the last several years, moved from a 3,400 square foot house to a 950 foot home. I have gotten rid of tons of stuff, and I can't believe the amount of unbearable lightness I have in my life. I clean less, I shuffle things around less, I have fewer clothes in my closet, yet more outfits to wear, more time to travel, more money to travel, more time with friends and family. I'm so excited. So talk to us about, define minimalism for our listeners.
Minimalism, in my view, is the intentional choice to live with less. Less stuff, yes, but also less obligation, less overwhelm. I think you really just spoke so aptly to the benefits that come with getting off the consumerist bandwagon, so to speak, without filling up our houses, our big houses, oftentimes with a lot of stuff. There's a lot of joy to be had when we embrace less. And that is a countercultural message, right? We're told more, bigger is better, more is better than less. But I found, and it sounds like you found too, that the opposite is actually true. Less truly is more.
Less truly is more. It's more time, more money. So if someone were going to start thinking about this lifetime and unpacking it, where would we start?
It starts by taking a critical look at your consumption habits. And that's not an easy first step, but it is an essential first step. I should say for me, this is, a little bit about my story, but I was an unconscious consumer for the first 30 years of my life. I didn't think about how stuff was made, where it comes from, where it would go once I no longer wanted it. I just bought what I could afford and, lived happily in my little bubble, so to speak. But that all changed once I had children. I found myself living in an 850 square foot apartment with my dog and our pets, and we happily coexisted. But then when the child came, in came the child and all the child's stuff, the baby stuff. And very quickly, it felt like we were squeezed out of our home. And so I decided one day, let's be smart. Let's work smarter, not harder. And so I decluttered the baby stuff that she wasn't using. She didn't need the frilly dresses. She didn't need all the toys or all the gear. And it was a real come to Jesus moment when I was quite literally, standing over piles of stuff that I shouldn't have bought, didn't need, didn't use, was detracting from my quality of life because I had no free time as a new mom. Who had time to put the stuff away, organize it, clean it, launder it, etc. And so looking at all the stuff that I had unconsciously consumed in a big pile on my kitchen floor, that's step one. It might look different for other people, but that was my step one.
That's a good step. You know what? You touched on something really important, and that's the way we purchase things, like being aware of where it came from and where it goes when you're done wearing it. I think this is a fascinating topic, and it's one that's taking hold. Talk a little bit more about that, if you would.
I think here, at least in the United States, we've been trained, so to speak, by savvy marketing professionals to buy the cheapest option or amass lots of quantity at the expense of quality. And I suggest we change that culturally embedded assumption. Many people, when they dig deep into where their products are made, how their products are made, what non-renewable resources are used to create this thing, this trinket, this tchotchke, whatever it is, there are a lot of people who are concerned with the ethical and environmental implications associated with amassing a bunch of cheap junk. And so conscious consumption, conscious consumerism is about not buying the cheapest, not buying the most, but having less, but better. Better, sometimes meaning more expensive. There is a privilege issue there. So not all of us can afford the best options on the market. But if you can buy better, conscious consumption and sustainable minimalism is about buying better.
I like that because the environmental impact is less, you're paying a fair wage. So you're really enhancing somebody else's life and giving back when we do buy ethically sourced items. Okay, so conscious buying, you saw all this stuff on your floor and decided enough, you got rid of it. What's our next thought process?
So in the minimalist sphere, you can't go very far without hearing about decluttering. And decluttering is extremely important. For many minimalist influencers out there, a clean and tidy and decluttered home is the end goal. And there's a lot of benefit and, like you said, joy to a decluttered home. However, for me, as a sustainable minimalist, the goal is not the tidy home. That's just a added benefit. The goal is a fundamental shift in the way that we view stuff. I always say you do have to start with a declutter, a whole house declutter. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It can be really hard, especially if you have decades of stuff. Maybe you have generational clutter. Maybe you have your parents and grandparents stuff. It's not easy, but it is essential, again, to have those, those gut moments in which your gut drops and it feels really terrible to sit in front of a bunch of stuff that you bought that you never should have bought in the first place. Having those feelings are what is going to, moving forward, change that relationship with your stuff.
Let me ask you, and then this is a selfish question. Let me ask you this. My grandmother's china. It's in the same boxes and it has moved from house to house to house to house. It's still sitting in my garage. Nobody wants it. It's breaking my heart. Like, what do we do with stuff like that? I don't want it anymore, but I can't bring myself to, I don't know what with it.
So your grandmother would not want her boxes of china to burden you, burden your garage space, burden your mental and emotional space. That's not the goal of her china. If you don't want it, I suggest you remember that your grandmother is not her china. You can still remember her with all the fond memories you have of her. You do not have to hold on to her china until your dying day. I would suggest maybe what I did with my grandmother's china is I kept one teacup and one saucer as a way to memorialize the set, sure, but more to keep a remembrance of her. I have so many memories, as I'm sure you do, of holidays around grandma's dinner table. And then the rest, I mean, china is a dime a dozen. If you go to a secondhand store, a thrift store, nobody wants your china, but perhaps you consider passing it on. Keep the one trinket and do something else with that space, that physical space in your garage, but also the mental space. I'm sure it's weighing you down. It's on your shoulders. Every time you pass that box, you just let out like a miserable sigh. It's time to usher it out and let in the good vibes.
Get the silverfish party gone. Okay, so as you go through your house and you start looking at all these things, is there a thought process that goes with that? Like I've heard people say, keep it, donate it, trash it. If it gives you joy, keep it. If it doesn't, get rid of it. Like, what is a thought process that we could use as we're going through our house?
So my number one is always quality over quantity. So if you have in your kitchen, let's say 5 spatulas, that has happened to me in the past. I did open my drawer and I did have 5 spatulas. Instead of, first of all, ask yourself, do you need 5 spatulas? Like you only have 2 hands. So at any given moment, you can only use 2, right? And then consider if you've decided you do not need 5 spatulas, you only need 2 or 1, you keep the best quality spatula. So the best quality spatula is not the plastic one. There's countless issues associated with plastic. You're going to want to keep the silicone one. Silicone has high heat resistance and low toxicity, whereas plastic has low heat resistance, high toxicity. So quality over quantity. You can take that and you can apply it everywhere. You can apply it to your linen closet, your sheets, your towels. Do you need 6 sets of sheets for one bed? I don't know. If you're going to declutter, why not get rid of the yucky ones that you wouldn't want guests to see? Maybe perhaps you consider keeping the organic cotton ones that, really do light you up. And again, you're not sleeping on synthetic material. So quality over quantity is always my number one go-to. I have some others if you want them.
Absolutely. Give us some more.
I always ask myself another question too when I'm decluttering, and that is, would I keep this if I downsized? That's like the best question, because I was living in an 850 square foot apartment. We have since moved to a 2,400 square foot house, but I do have dreams of getting back to the apartment. And so I always ask myself, would I keep this if I downsized? If the answer is no, then I ask myself, well, why am I keeping it now? That's a question. And then another question, if we're on the topic of questions we ask ourselves, another question that always seems to work for me personally is, would I replace this if it broke? So a great example here is when my cell phone broke a couple months back. It just all of a sudden one day wouldn't work. I dropped everything on my calendar and I rushed to the store and I had that thing replaced within 4 hours because I have a cell phone problem, addiction, if you will.
It's a lifeline. It's okay.
But using that same logic, when my garlic press, so that thing that you use to mince garlic, when that snapped, I said, and I minced with my knife. So again, would you drop everything on your calendar to replace this item, or could you make do without? So those are some first steps for listeners.
I love that question. I really love that question. Okay. So decluttering, talk to us about the benefits, like the mind space, and you've had lots of experience with that. So tell us the benefits of getting rid of this stuff. And then let's talk about calendars.
Yeah, let's talk about the benefits. So for me, I have experienced significantly less stress, less anxiety, more free time. Those are the benefits for me. Even though it's 2022, and even though if you're in a heterosexual partnership, men tend to be stepping up in terms of housework. The traditional model of women being the homemakers continues to reign supreme. Even in my house with my husband, trying to do better than previous generations, I am still in charge of the lion's share of housework. And so when I have less stuff to clean, maintain, service, put away, I have more free time. I should also say too that not just me, but many people attest that visual clutter creates inner stress. So visual overstimulation, kicks us off balance internally. And that is absolutely true for me. So clean spaces, more calm internally.
I would have to agree with that. If I walk in and see a bunch of clutter, all I see is stuff to dust, put away. It's anxiety provoking. Walk into a calm space and I'm relaxed. I'm ready for a glass of wine or a cup of tea. So yeah. So that's decluttering our space. What about decluttering our calendars?
So the great thing about minimalism is that its tenets can be applied to other areas of your life. It's not just about number of things. It's not just about sparking joy with the number of spatulas that you have. You can apply the less is more intentional living strategies of minimalism to your calendar. So I am an extrovert. I have serious FOMO, fear of missing out. I used to say yes to everything just because I didn't want to miss out. I was invited. I've got to go if I have that hole in my calendar. And these days, my family, we say yes, we accept the invitations to the things that we want to do. That will truly light us up, that will truly add to our lives. My kids too, I have a 5-year-old and an 8-year-old, and the 8-year-old especially, there's a pull to do all the sports, to do all the extracurriculars. And yes, extracurriculars, absolutely, research has shown have incredible benefits for children. However, there is such thing as too much of a good thing. And so we really limit, we really sit down and we're intentional about what are we most interested in, child? Time is not infinite. What are you most interested in doing? We will sign up for those things. It tends to be just 2 things as opposed to, I don't know, 1 thing a night.
So do your kids do they have resentment around that? Do they have FOMO? Do they have peer pressure? Like, how does that work out from a mom's perspective?
They don't have FOMO with regard to calendar or obligations or extracurriculars. I will say that my 8-year-old is starting to push back with regard to stuff. She goes over a friend's house. She sees her friends having this it item or that it item. And, she does come home and she just the other day, Mom, how come I don't have an Alexa? And, my answer to that question and others is quite simple. In this family, we do things differently. That family is not better or worse. We're not better or worse. We just do things differently. And so, maybe in a couple years, 5-ish years, you should interview me again and we'll see how that's going. But that's where we're at now.
We're going to have that discussion down the road. Yeah. So you're reminding me of a story, and I think it was the British rowing team won the Olympics, and it was the women's rowing team. And after winning that, they got invited to all kinds of parties and press releases, and their calendar could have been jammed full. And the question the team always asked themselves was, does this make my boat go faster? And if it didn't make the boat go faster, they didn't do it. And now as I think about obligations and does this stuff make my boat go faster? Wow, it's easy to say no to a lot of things because I'm saying yes to the things that really like feed my soul, make me relaxed, re-energize me rather than suck the daylights out of me.
Yeah.
So calendars, do you have a graceful way for people to say no?
Yeah, use the sandwich method, which is start with a profuse thank you, then go into an unfortunately I can't attend. You don't always need to give an explanation as to why. I don't suggest lying. You just say, unfortunately, I can't attend. And then you sandwich that in with but I hope to come to the next event. Again, thank you so much. Simple.
Love that. That's so easy. So easy. Thank you. So decluttering our homes, decluttering our calendars. How about our mind space?
So this one is, again, a great place to apply the tenets of minimalism. I will say I'm working on it. I am a 0 to Oprah type of person. I have trouble having downtime.
I've never heard that.
But again, it's all about being intentional with how you want your life to look, how you want your days to look. I actually, because I am so 0 to Oprah, so I have a planner every day. I have to schedule in the downtime because I know that when I allow myself space and room to breathe and recharge, I do the work, I do the parenting, I do the cooking, I do the wifing. I do all those things better. And so again, it's about sitting down, thinking about what brings you joy, making sure you do it. For me, it's reading a book, walking my dog, going for a run. But again, I have that type of personality. I have to schedule it in.
I think for a lot of us, it has to be that way. And isn't it true that our best creativity comes from our down moments? So it's so important. What got you into minimalism?
Well, again, the decluttering of my infant daughter's stuff was a big moment. But I will also say too, that for me, so after I decluttered my daughter's things, I went online and I joined all the minimalism groups on Facebook. And I was so thrilled to, be a minimalist. All my problems are solved. But very quickly, I realized that the minimalist conversation was missing a big piece, which was, of course, the environmental part. Sticking all your perfectly good stuff in a trash bag and letting the lovely garbage men and women ship it away to the landfill. That wasn't for me. And if that is what minimalism is, then I'm not a minimalist. So then I went on the other extreme, which was I started joining all the zero waste groups and the gung-ho environmentalist groups. And I learned an awful lot in those groups. I learned an awful lot about the state of our planet, about how I can be doing better for my children. However, that area was really militant. And as a mom, I'm not
Right.
putting all my trash in a little jar, right? That's not realistic. So I realized that minimalism on one end of the spectrum and eco-friendly living on the other end of the spectrum, there's a middle ground. And that is about living with less, living with more intention for the betterment of the planet. And that's the space I operate in. That's what sustainable minimalism is. I started my podcast and my platform because nobody was talking about that. It was either one or the other. And I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, it can be both.
There's something in the middle. Yeah. If you do you have any suggestions? If you could think of one thing to give our audience, what would it be?
I would give them the encouragement and the motivation to say that there is a subset of the population that is boldly going against the grain, that is boldly questioning the more messaging that we hear every day. You don't have to keep up with the Joneses, and actually life is a lot happier and freer if you don't.
It's so true. It's so true. Stephanie, tell us how our listeners can find you and learn more.
My podcast is named Sustainable Minimalists. You can find it everywhere you find podcasts. I just have to say I'm really, really proud of it. It is a top 10 home and garden podcast here in the US. And my book, if you prefer your information in book form, my book is called Sustainable Minimalism.
Very good. Well, I'm going to be certainly browsing onto the book and tuning in, because the more I get into this lifestyle, the more I just love it and the happier I am. And so on that note, this is Barbara Norman. If you want to learn more about creating joy in your financial plan, please connect with me at Sage Path Solutions. And with that, I hope you all have a happy, happy day.
Advisory services are offered through Barbara J. Norman, LLC, an investment advisor in the states of California and Texas. The information contained herein should in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell, nor an offer to sell advisory services to any residents of any state other than the state of California, or where otherwise legally permitted. All content is for information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax or legal advice or provide the basis for any financial decisions. The information contained in this material has been derived from sources believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed as to accuracy and completeness and does not purport to be complete analysis of the materials discussed. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of SagePath Solutions and are subject to change without notice.